we want our schools to be white. And she's 6. And so her mom agreed to do it because a lot of the times when you hear about these desegregation stories, it's because the mothers were activists. They were like the original Black Lives Matter activists. And they were like, I'm going to take a chance. And they, asked their kids if they were willing to do it. And a lot of these kids were just super brave and they were just willing to do it. And Ruby was 6 and she was willing to try. And, but just imagine being a 6-year-old kid and how scary that must have been to have these big armed National Guardsmen walking you into school. But once you get inside, there's no guards there anymore. There's nobody there. You're just a 6-year-old who nobody will play with. You remember being a kid and having like a time, if you've ever been through like bullying or kids being mean to you in school. Can you imagine that for a whole semester where no one will even talk to you or eat lunch with you and you're 6? And so these parents, and they're not really just regular parents. They're actually activists on the anti-history movement. Sorry about the lighting here. It's the backlight from the windows of the car. These anti-history fanatics, basically, they think her story is too radical because you are describing the white people screaming at Ruby Bridges as white people screaming at Ruby Bridges. Well, how do they want it to be described? The nice people who had their mouths open, but they were saying mean stuff, but they really weren't. Like, what do they want said about these people? That's what I would love to know. What do they want? How do they want this situation to be described? Because it is what it is. There's video of it. It happened. Like, there's video. It's not like a made up story Ruby Bridges made up. Do they want the story? They just want the story to be disappeared. It's very much like in China, you can't teach about the Tiananmen Square massacre. You can't teach it in school. You're not allowed to, because they have something called the patriotic history. And now the Americans want to have the same kind, these right wingers, they want to have the same kind of like North Korea, communist China, state mandated education where all you get to learn is this pabulum bedtime story history that doesn't make white people feel uncomfortable. Well, what do you want to talk about in history then? You can't really talk about anything because everything's going to make y'all feel uncomfortable. A lot of American history is like not allowed to teach anything about the South and about the Civil War or about slavery unless that was in any way injurious to the South. You had to do it in a way that didn't make the South feel bad. That means you really haven't learned anything. That's why you don't know about these massacres, right? Because they mandated for decades that you couldn't talk about anything to do with the Klan. I mean, my brother Orrin is on. At one point, the Republican governor and the Republican governor of Colorado and the Democratic mayor of Denver were both Ku Klux Klan leaders at the same time. The Colorado was one of those states where in the 1950s, it was almost completely taken over by the Klan. And one of the things we actually did learn in school is that the Klan would use the Rocky Mountains to stage their cross burnings because they knew that you could see the crosses from all over Denver because, Denver's the mile-high city. So if you burn crosses in the mountains, you would see them everywhere. And they wanted to make sure that the 6% of Coloradans who were black could always see the crosses even if they weren't in their lawns. We learned that in Colorado. But what we didn't learn is that Stapleton, right? And so there was a Stapleton Center where black people used to play basketball, And Stapleton Arena, I think it was called Stapleton Arena, or is it Stapleton Arena or Stapleton Center? I don't even remember anymore. But I graduated in there. And that dude was a Klansman. He was like a grand wizard of the Klan. Mayor Stapleton of Denver was like a grand wizard of the Klan. And I think that the governor was like a Glenn Kliegel of the Ku Klux Klan. In Colorado. Like, Colorado at one point was Klan deep. So it's like, he says Boulder was home to the Grand Wizard of the KKK for a long time. That was my brother saying that. So even a state like Colorado, Stapleton Airport, right? Stapleton was the airport. Sorry about that. McNichols was the arena. So it's like you have all of these like hidden histories of these places. Like in Oklahoma, they never taught about the Tulsa massacre. They just didn't teach it in school. They just memory hold it. So these memory laws that they're trying to pass all over the country, did you guys know that the first state to institute Jim Crow was Florida? Did anybody know that? The first state to institute Jim Crow in the South after the 1877 pullout of U.S. troops. So basically, after the Civil War, black and white people basically kind of intermingled freely. There wasn't Jim Crow after the Civil War. Everybody was just sort of off to their own devices. And that was because everywhere you went, there were federal troops. There were Union troops, armed Union troops everywhere. And then in 1877, they did this wicked compromise where Rutherford Hayes, right? So Florida was tipping the election, and there was a typical Florida election. They couldn't figure out who won. They couldn't figure out which of the two candidates won. And Rutherford Hayes, they cut a deal to let Rutherford Hayes win the Electoral College and be president in exchange for removing the federal troops from the South. That horrible compromise. As soon as those troops were gone, the South started implementing Jim Crow laws, including the law that winds up getting you Plessy versus Ferguson, right? Actually, that already was existing. I think they did that one in 1890. In 1890, they did the law that said in the state of Louisiana, there would be separate train cars for white and black people. That was in 1890. That's what Plessy went to. That's what the Plessy versus Ferguson case was about, because he challenged the laws by going in as a colored man and sitting in the white section, getting arrested, and then he goes to the Supreme Court. Because it was immediately. But the first state that started implementing Jim Crow laws after the troops pulled out in 1877, and they did theirs that year, was Florida. People don't even know that. They assume it was Mississippi or Alabama. It was Florida. Do y'all even know that? They had segregation in the North, too. It wasn't just the South. They did it in the North commonly, even before the troop pullout. So that's the thing, is we don't know these things. Did y'all know that the Seminoles fought the United States to a draw in all of these wars they fought in Florida? That's how they ended up having their own land and being able to have casinos and stuff, because they fought Andrew Jackson to a draw. They were never defeated in a war ever, and that black people fought in that war. Do you guys even know that? People in Florida don't know that. So that's the thing, is that we know almost nothing. I remember going to Europe as a kid, and the kid who was in the house in Germany, and part of our trip was in Germany, we went to all these different countries. We stayed in the house in Germany. The 15-year-old boy, and I was 15, he knew more about American history than I did, and I'm a history nerd. Because we don't know anything. We're just not taught. And so think about the fact that we already barely know anything about our history. They want us to know even less. They want the next generation of kids to be even more ignorant than we are, because that's the only way that they can stay in power and feel comfortable. They just don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't like the fact that they are uncomfortable when you talk about lynching, or uncomfortable. You know who's uncomfortable when you talk about lynching? Black people, because we're the ones in the picture being lynched. And I've taught lynching to my students at Syracuse, most of my classes were almost all white kids, and they handled it. They were fine. They had never heard any of this stuff. When I would teach I will always open with lynching. I always open my classes. I talk about race and media, and I would always open because I just wanted to make sure that people knew some basic history of this country. And these kids didn't know anything I was talking about. I would show them these pictures. They didn't know any of it. They had no idea. And these are educated kids. They were juniors and seniors in college at Syracuse, smart kids. And they handled it. They were okay. They weren't broken by it. They liked the class. So are you basically saying that, it's kind of insulting. It's basically saying that these white kids are so soft and fragile that they can't handle history. That's not even about them personally. We're not saying you lynch somebody. They think these kids are so fragile and their little hearts are going to be broken if they find out somebody who's also white like them did something bad. That doesn't make any sense. I know OJ did bad things. That doesn't make me feel bad about myself. I mean, we just found out Bill Cosby was raping everybody. That doesn't make me feel bad. Why would you feel bad because somebody not related that you don't even know, that's been dead for hundreds of years, did some bad stuff? Why would that hurt your self-esteem and make you feel sad? So what? Right? You're not that. So if you're not that, if you're not the type of person why would that make you feel bad? That is stupid. You're basically saying that your kids are dumb or that your kids are weak. So I don't understand what they're doing. They want their kids to be ignorant because they think their kids are weak. I think what they're really afraid of, though, is that not that they think their kids are weak, they're afraid their kids will become woke. That's what they're afraid of. That if you tell kids about these misdeeds that America has done, they're afraid their kids will then be liberals. And that's what they're really afraid of. They're afraid their kids will be what their kids are already turning into. Because of George Floyd, and their kids had nothing to do for a year, their kids were all at George Floyd protests. They're mad because they're afraid their children will be in Black Lives Matter. If they learn about what was done to black people and to indigenous people, they're afraid they'll become woke. That's what they're afraid of. And that's just too bad, because you know what's going to happen? If you try to hide history from kids, it's like hiding alcohol from them. It's like telling them not to smoke. The worst thing you can do is tell kids they can't know something. They're going to go find out. They have the internet. They have TikTok. They know more than we do. My kids have to look stuff up for me. They're better at search than I am. So you think you're going to hide the truth from these children? You think they're so stupid that they're not going to just go look it up? If you tell them, don't look at that, don't look at that, that history is bad, they're just going to go look at it. That's like telling kids, you know, anything you tell them not to do, they do it. You can't stop them. Let's see if anybody has any questions you want to throw out there. Thank you guys for all the love. Appreciate that. But yeah, it's funny to me because they're insulting their own kids. They think their kids are either stupid or weak, or they're afraid that they will think for themselves. They don't want them to. But they're going to do what they're going to do. And also, as somebody said, education equals power, and these extremists can't allow that. That's exactly right. Once they learn, they might upturn the system. And if they overturn the system, who would benefit are the poor, are the disenfranchised, the very people they want to keep on the bottom. They're afraid that they will fight. Their kids will join the fight to lift people off the bottom. And that's what they're really scared of, more than anything else. They're afraid of the Great Awakening. You're right. That's what they call it the Great Awakening. The real Great Awakening is when these little kids figure out what's going on. They've been lied to. You know, like when you tell kids something and then years later they find out that it was a lie. You know how angry they get? They'll come to you and be like, remember when you told me my goldfish went to sleep and then you had to put him in the toilet because that's where his bed was? That was a lie. They will remind you of that. They'll be 30 and come at you with that. Right? You ever told your kids something that was like a euphemism for something else, and then as they find out as an adult that it wasn't true? Like the Santa thing, which I still tell my kids this is Santa Israel. I'll never admit that. They could do anything. They could lock me in a closet. They could do anything. I'll never admit Santa's not real. But I mean, the thing is, kids get mad when they find out. If somebody else tells them Santa, they get really angry. So go ahead, keep lying to your kids. I teach some of your kids. Your kids are a lot smarter than you think, and they're a lot tougher than you think, and they can take a lot more than apparently their weak-minded parents. It's pathetic. American exceptionalism teaches that this country is above reproach despite this murderous history, says my brother, and that's very true. Somebody called me their 2021 Angela Davis. I appreciate that. That's a huge honor. I love Angela Davis. She is so awesome. I got to meet her in Martha's Vineyard one year, which was pretty cool. I took my 13-year-old daughter and her friends to a Black Lives Matter protest in Philadelphia. It became part of their education, says one poster. Very true. And that's the thing, is that, you know, kids also tend to be very contrarian. So, like, you notice a lot of, you know, it's like the Alex P. Keaton effect, right? Like, very liberal parents can produce very conservative kids and vice versa. It's like, you go online to your kids and telling them the founders were great men. They opposed slavery, even though all but 7 of them had slaves and never let them go. You know, only 5 of the founders ever released any of their slaves when they died. Thomas Jefferson kept all but like 3 of his slaves because he was so broke. He was like Donald Trump. He was a terrible businessman. Thomas Jefferson had all this land, and he was basically running a slave factory. Like, he was breeding slaves like cattle on his farm, and he had like 1,000 slaves. It was a torture chamber. He was like raping Sally Hemings every day, making kids with her, and then owning the kids like he was making baby cows. And then when he died, he was such a bad businessman that he had to sell off. He did a whole big slave auction. You can find it online, where he did this huge, like, a fire sale. He was like, our prices are insane. He did one of those toward the end of his life because he was broke, and he never let his slaves go because he was too broke. Now, does that mean that we are like, oh, we hate Thomas Jefferson and we got to take, you know, we can't learn that he did, he was a good writer and wrote some good things? No. he wrote some fine words in the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't take anything away from him. I mean, Bill Cosby still did the Cosby Show, right? Even if he was a reprobate. But you still Albert. Like, if you're actually an adult, you can have those two thoughts in your mind at the same time, right? That somebody can be an asshole but still do a few good things, right? I mean, George Washington, that whole story about him chopping down a cherry tree and he couldn't tell lies, that's bullshit. Like, that's like a thing you learned in second grade. That's not true. But it does that have to be true? Like, do you need George Washington to have chopped down a cherry tree and can't tell a lie? Like, that's the only way you can survive as an American? Then you're pretty weak. Like, the only way you can make it, you're not going to make it if George Washington could tell a lie. He used his slaves' teeth as his dentures. That's true. That doesn't mean he wasn't, a great first president. Right? It's kind of ridiculous. Oh, people are talking about Howard U. Yes, Howard University. We're very excited about Ta-Nehisi Coates and Nicole Hannah-Jones. Good for them. I did teach there. I'm not teaching there next semester, but this is going to encourage me to go back in the spring. I might want to go back. For real. Something about Rick Santorum. Oh, yeah. Yes, Rick Santorum thanking Cinnamon and Mansion. Yeah. I mean, Cinema and Mansion. Shameful. But if you don't like those Democrats, and this is what I was talking with some friends of mine about this, if these Democrats are frustrating you, and if you live in their states, you might want to think about primarying them or supporting somebody who's primarying them, because if they're not doing what you want, they do work for you, and they don't have to have those jobs. Everyone's replaceable. Everyone is replaceable. And if you don't like them, replace them. Some people are saying proud Howard alum. Yeah, y'all got Kamala Harris, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Nicole Hannah-Jones. Like, you guys have, like, everything. Like, y'all really are just stacked right now. Howard University is, like, the school. I think if I were a junior or a senior in high school right now, I would 100% be applying to Howard University right now. That's the hot place to be. Forget UNC. The hot place to be is definitely Howard. Yeah, so Santorum is he's just a commentator now. It doesn't really matter what he says. He's just like a commentator. He doesn't even have a job at CNN anymore. Somebody saying local elections are important. That's very true. And y'all better think about those school board races, because that's where they're running. So the one thing I will give the right credit for is they are very savvy about how to get power. They start from the bottom and work their way up. Like, they go right for the school board, then they try to get on the city council, then they try to get on, they get on the elections board. Like, they're going in they're putting their people in every cranny and nook and cranny in government, and they don't care how low or how high. They want to be everywhere. Oh, we've got a Hampton mom. Oh, here comes the HBCU competition. We have a Hampton mom who just jumped on. Hampton's great too. I had somebody text me because I mentioned Bethune-Cookman yesterday, and they were very excited. The Bethune-Cookman people were in the house, so we know it's all very competitive. I tried to make a Morehouse man, but my middle son got in and didn't go. I was very disappointed. I was like, don't you want to go where Dr. King went? And that did not move him. He's an art student. They're going everywhere. They're trying to get into every nook and cranny. Democrats don't do that. Democrats are like, they don't want to do it. They'll go in everywhere, and they're going to put those QAnon people everywhere. And then what are you going to do? FAMU is in the house. Everybody's throwing it up at Spelman. I did also try to encourage a Spelman. Oh, it's dark. Woo! I'm in the dark. I did try to encourage my daughter to go to Spelman. She didn't. But she did later say that she should have listened to me and gone to Spelman. So I won that battle. I lost the war, but I won the battle. Because she did admit that she made a mistake by not going to Spelman. It's a great place. And they're beautiful campuses, by the way. If you guys have never had the chance to go on and check out the Spelman Morehouse, it's like a big multi-campus where they're both on the same campus and they're sort of next to each other. Gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Cheney U is in the house. Oh, everybody's throwing their people in. We live near Bowie State. Bowie State is also great. So all of the different HBCUs. Norfolk State. Yep, Norfolk State is up in there. Bennett College. I know some great people from Bennett College. I spoke there a few years ago. Some of the nicest people ever. Bennett was fabulous. They have a great media program at Bennett. Southern University, A&M. North Carolina Central. Yes, North Carolina Central. Nice. Yes. Okay. Eagle Pride. So, somebody said we PWI people are okay. I know I went to Harvard, y'all. Listen, I can't talk. So I was at the PWIs too with all the rest of y'all. It's all good. Wherever you went to school, as long as you got your degree, that's the most important thing. I mean, you can always add to your degree by going somewhere else for graduate school if you can find some money to pay for it, or get a scholarship. Okay, what do we got? We got the A&M. Here we go. Southern University A&M Jaguars. People are throwing the whole the whole thing in. Benedict College, everybody's throwing it in. Okay, well, we appreciate you guys. So I am heading to the full weekend. What is it? Coppin State. I haven't heard of Coppin State University. There's also Miles College, which my son Miles likes because his name is Miles. So I'm heading out, and I'm just going to wish you